It's that time of the week again. Let's just dive straight into it this week. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we're diving back into Lightroom. We're going to edit a photo. I've been out with the Hasselblad X2D camera recently, right? We're going to have a review shortly on the channel. Spoilers. It's super nice, which you'd probably expect. But today we're going to edit a photo that I took with that camera, which I'm really pleased with. It's a photo I've been wanting to capture for a little while. It's of my dog. We're actually going to do a tutorial in the near future on pet photography in general. So if there's something specific that you'd like to see about that, let me know down in the comments, or of course anything else at all as well. I love making the stuff you guys want to see. So today, let's dive into Lightroom. We're going to edit this photo and we're going to use a bunch of different tricks within Lightroom to make it work. We're going to explore a few different things that we can do with the program. So let's go ahead and get involved. Now this is the photo here. I really like it. Now I was using the 55mm f2.5 lens, which is a beautiful lens, but obviously it's a medium format sensor. I probably would have liked to have gotten in a little bit closer, but that doesn't matter because it's a 100 megapixel sensor, which means we can crop with really no worries at all. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing we're going to do is just crop in. I also want to make this 16:9. Big fan of that, to be honest with you. I just like the feel of that. And we're going to go for something probably like this. We've got lots and lots of detail to play around with. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. I might even just bring that over a touch like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, of course, we're very low to the ground, which is great. We're actually slightly underneath her eye level, which is great for almost a little bit of a heroic kind of positioning and composition there. We're really low with a nice out of focus foreground and then background. I think the sky looks good. We're going to play around with this. I like the light as well. It's very directional, but from the side. So let's go ahead and start actually editing this. We're going to start with a general global edit, and then we're going to go into doing some masking, which is always the way I kind of recommend doing this sort of stuff. Now we could start by coming over to the left and actually playing around with some of these presets. I think some of these are actually pretty good. I mean, we could come in with something like this one here, which I quite like. I don't mind that one as a summery feel. Maybe even something like that. You know what? That one's quite nice, actually. Now I can click that and come up here to this slider and actually just bring down the amount that it's applied. We can press the backslash key on the keyboard to see before and then after. So a pretty subtle effect, but I quite like the look of it. We can also come up here to this actual part here, the profile browser, and we can see some more things we can apply to this photo. And again, we can reduce the amount they're applied. Let's click that. Let's just bring down the amount that's being applied. I like doing this sometimes. It gives you a little starting point for your edit. So if you don't know exactly what you want to do with it, that can be a nice way of going about. Now, something that I'll often do is actually right click on the photo down here and actually go ahead and click create virtual copy. And that means I can make a couple of different versions of it, maybe with different color grades, different feels to them. That can be quite handy as well. Now, first up, I'm going to bring the contrast up a little bit. I think what we've done with these different presets is actually bring that down. So I just want to bring that up a little bit. I want to bring the highlights down a touch and then the shadows up, not too much, but a little bit there. We're actually going to bring the clarity up as well. And then the vibrance up, but the saturation down just a little bit. Now, I tend to use vibrance over saturation because it just gives a better feel. So it's a smarter way of kind of increasing that color and that feel in the photo, which I like. Now we can come down to the HSL tab. I'm going to leave the tone curve for now. And perhaps in hue, I'll just bring the oranges down a little bit. You can see the presets have already done a little bit of work here. You don't have to start with presets. I often don't, but sometimes it's nice to sort of play around with something like that. And I'm going to probably leave the saturation as is. I'm going to bring the reds back down to there. And I might just bring that blue up a touch as well. We've got some color grading here from the presets. We can turn that off, turn that back on. I quite like that. It's probably roughly what I would have done, blue in the shadows and then sort of orange in the highlights and the midtones. I think it all looks good here, but I'm going to click auto for the transform. I'm actually going to turn that off. I think that it basically looks fine as it is. I'm probably going to leave things like having any kind of vignetting, and with the calibration, I'm just going to move the reds towards the orange and then the blues towards the teal. And we get quite a nice sort of color grade. So backslash key to see before, after. You can see quite a lot has happened with regards to the actual kind of contrast, the highlights, the shadows, and then the color as well. Let's come up here. Let's start doing some masking. So first up, Let's click the masking panel here. Let's go ahead and click subject. Now that is going to let Lightroom mask out Nala, my dog here. So great, there we go. We can now increase the exposure a little bit. I'm going to increase the shadows a touch as well. That makes her face much more visible. It makes her pop a little bit more in the photo. I really like that. I think that looks good. Now I'm going to create another new mask. I'm going to go linear gradient. I'm going to bring that up from the bottom. And I'm actually going to bring that exposure down. I want to darken that foreground just a little bit, just to make her really the brighter part of that object. Let's create another new mask. This time let's go select sky. I want to bring down the brightness of the sky a little bit, but what I want to do is actually, I'm going to add a little bit of dehaze to it. And then let's see what happens if we bring the saturation down. A little bit more dehaze, a little bit of saturation down, maybe even add a little bit of clarity in there. I think that looks pretty good. We can now go ahead and maybe want to add a little vignetting from the top down. You know, essentially like a linear gradient, but coming down across the sky. So we might want to go create a new mask, linear gradient. We might want to bring that down from the top like this, and then bring that exposure down a little bit like that. Now, sometimes that might create a bit of an issue with our subject here, but that doesn't matter too much because we can actually go ahead, right click this and intersect mask with select subject. That's going to actually apply the mask only to where our subject is. So if I press O, you can see that the mask is actually only applied from that linear gradient, but only when it intersects with our subject. But if we click invert, it's now affecting the sky, and actually we can alter this. If I bring this down, it will affect everything except our subject there. So it's intersecting, I guess, negatively with the subject. And this is a great way of adding a mask behind your subject or on top of your subject, but only affecting your subject. I think this works really good. So let's actually press O again so we don't see the mask. Let's bring that exposure down a little bit. I think that that already looks really nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and click linear gradient. I'm going to bring this in from the right like this, because that's the direction the sun is coming in from. It's quite directional, so I want it to feel that way again. I'm going to bring the dehaze down and the exposure up just a touch. I want it to feel like the sunlight is flooding in from that right-hand side. Now, if I go ahead and go back to the edit panel, let's press backslash. Let's see how far we've come now. This was where we started with this photo, and this is where we've ended up. Now, what's funny about this is when you see where we started here and then where we've ended up, it's quite a big difference actually. We've done a lot to this photo, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way when you're doing it. So a good tip here, first of all, is to check how far you've come, because sometimes, and believe me, I've done this many times. You can just watch some of the videos we've done and you can see it. You can overdo it a little bit. So you want to kind of try and keep yourself in check. Another good tip is to just walk away. Do the edit, walk away, 15 minutes, go and do something else. You know, make a cup of coffee, have a chat with someone, anything at all. Come back, fresh eyes will give you a slightly different perspective on the photo. But otherwise, for me now, this is pretty much exactly how I wanted this to come out. Before, after, and I'm really, really happy with that. That's something that I would be happy to hang on my wall. I'd love to have a photo of my dog actually off my wall somewhere, and perhaps I will do that. But ultimately, this is the kind of slightly heroic pose for her because we're slightly underneath her eye level looking up at her. We've got that lovely foreground out of focus across those pebbles. We've got the sky and the sea. She is absolutely the main part of the photo. There's nothing particularly distracting around her. And I think we've brightened her up reasonably naturally without making it look too much like an over HDR'd image. So I think that looks good, but I'd love to hear what you think. Are these different tricks, intersecting masks, using a linear gradient mask to simulate sunlight coming in? Are these things that you use in your editing? Are these things that you would use in the future? Are there other tricks you might have used for this? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. Of course, you can check out the Hasselblad X2D, which I used to take this photo, by checking out the link down in the description as well. So make sure you don't miss out. I will, of course, see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.